Hello, my name is Bridgitte Thao, and I'm a first-year student at Yale College studying ethics, politics, and economics. This is my first year working for the Yale Center for British Art as a student guide. I'm thrilled to be giving you a glimpse into the YCBA's permanent collection with my tour titled Re-Orienting the Empire. This tour will focus on 3 British paintings depicting Eastern and Near Eastern territories and colonies from 1772 to 1990. Along the way, we'll be making stops in India, Egypt, and Turkey as we ponder how British art portrayed individuals from the Orient as times changed the empire. As I proceed through this collection, feel free to pause the video at any time to soak in the art before your eyes. Imagine the vastness, or meekness, of the painting. Examine as closely as your heart desires. All I ask is that you try not to get lost. To begin our tour, we'll be looking at a painting that provides an intimate study of the beginning of British encroachment into India. Before we dive into more historical information, though, let's explore the theoretical foundation underlying this tour. In his monumental book, Orientalism, Edward Said critiques the academic field of Oriental studies for dangerously romanticizing the Orient, a region that encompasses a myriad of cultures and languages. Orientalists of the 19th and 20th centuries surveyed the regions of North Africa, the Middle East, and Asia with a romantic eye, often searching to extract general observations with little genuine engagement with the complex, multifaceted cultures of the East. Today's tour will focus on the framing of Eastern subjects through an Orientalist lens. How do British artists conform to this framework of romanticization? How do they deviate from these rose-colored lenses, if at all? Most pressingly, what do these portrayals tell us about the confluence of art and history? Our first painting centers around India and the emergence of Britain as a colonial power. This painting by Tilly Kettle, titled Shuja-ud-Dawla, Nawab of Oudh, is oil on canvas and 50 inches by 40 inches. That's 127 centimeters by 101.6 centimeters for our friends across the pond. It depicts a mighty provincial ruler of the territory of Oudh that had only recently broken free from the rule of the Mughal Empire. So, as you imagine an imposing portrait that is nearly 4 feet tall, allow me to share some historical context. Oudh, the region this Nawab, or the provincial ruler, reigned over, was formerly under the command of the Mughal Empire, a conglomeration of Turkic Mongol rulers spanning much of the Indian subcontinent. By the 1750s, however, Oudh had eked out of the domination of the Mughal Empire. The newly freed territory suited a newly departed English painter by the name of Tilly Kettle. Kettle found his way to Oudh since the competition amongst portraiture painters of Georgian England was quite fierce. Thomas Gainsborough was actually a contemporary of Kettle and dominated this portraiture scene, leading to Kettle's move and occupation with individuals of Oudh. He found not only favor with the East India Company officers, one of whom purchased this very painting, but also with Shuja-ud-Dawla, who invited him to continue painting members of his court. Unlike Kettle, Gainsborough demonstrated the ability to wow viewers with portraits and also sweeping landscapes. Take a moment to compare the 2 paintings before you, with Shuja-ud-Dawla on the left and a Gainsborough portrait of Sir William Putney on the right. Notice the differences in the presentation of the subject and the background. While Gainsborough's versatility enraptured English viewers, Kettle was able to wow onlookers abroad. Kettle's budding interest in capturing the novel lands of northern India is evident in this next painting, where Kettle captures a woman dressed in a rich red sari holding a hookah. In both paintings, the composition is similar, although the respective subjects address the viewer in completely different ways. In Shuja's portrait, Kettle portrays a domineering ruler with tiny figures in the background and a stormy sky. In the second painting, Kettle's subject demurely turns her head away from the viewer, either on purpose or incidentally. She appears in motion, although her posture is perfect. Her full figure and opulence is on display, as is the hookah, which became a symbol for colonial commingling between Eastern herbal treatments and Western consumption. As different as these portraits are, what similarities can you pick up on? There is an element of opulence that seems to pervade both paintings. In the Nawab portrait, it is through the layers upon layers of fabrics being worn. In the portrait of the woman, it is the glimmer of the bangles and the ankle bracelets that draw the viewer's eyes throughout the painting. The fleshed out interior of the background further entices the viewer to continue their visual dawdling. From these two paintings, a few details point us back to the theme of Orientalism. First, the emphasis on the status of the Nawab. Kettle paints the numerous layers of the provincial ruler's dress with hyperfocal detail, capturing the glimmer of the gold thread in his tunic and the glint of the hairs of his vest. Even at such material ease, there is a stiffness to the Nawab's posture that implies unnaturalness. Firstly, his firm grip on the horn and his stern gaze communicate something less than thrill at the capturing of his likeness. The Nawab was actually not fond of the growing English presence in his territory, but with Kettle, he grew enticed by the prospect of projecting his authority through visual immortalization. Thus, a sort of symbiotic relationship was ignited between Kettle and the Nawab. The painter gained an affluent patron, and the prince gained a weapon for exerting his authority. However, with the downfall of the Oudh territory in 1764, this provincial power crumbled to dust. Kettle's works did not meet the same fate. Where politics faded, art triumphed. However, as this painting seems to cage the Nawab in a spot of time, so too it captures a moment of hesitance in history. Very briefly, I want to address this group of men in the back. One group is dressed in white, and the most prominent figure to the viewer stands with ambiguous action. Where is he looking? What is he thinking? The others, who are dressed in red, seem to move with firmness. Something is amiss in the land, and it's no coincidence that those donning the color of blood are also the ones in possession of the arms. Next to the projection of royal power, what is the political turmoil of common men? Our next stop is Cairo, Egypt, where a pioneer of the Orientalist art movement lived for 10 years as he created sketches and watercolors that would eventually culminate in grand paintings that enchanted the London scene. This next painting is titled, "And the Prayer of Faith Shall Save the Sick," and was created by John Frederick Lewis in 1872. This painting is also oil on canvas and perches on a wall somewhere with the dimensions of 35 inches by 27 inches. The title of this painting reveals a vital theme to this piece. It is actually an excerpt from the New Testament calling for submission to an all-forgiving God. At first glance, many things are apparent to the eye, including the crowd of subjects that Lewis depicts. One group gravitates towards a Quran. Another group of ladies tends towards a woman resting on a bed, and a lone servant remains obscured by the doorway of the colorful walls behind this assembly. The scattered focal points of the painting, the different uses of lighting and color, create a cacophony of lush imagery for the eye. Aside from the blend of different races and genders of people, carefully examine the painting and note how many other instances of blending you spot. An interesting facet of the syncretism Lewis presents in this painting is embodied in the physical environment. Look closely above the woman laying on the bed. Trace the walls behind her, and up your eye goes until it hits a pale rectangle. Within this tile sits the Egyptian goddess Hathor, the patroness of motherhood and love. So, Physically presiding over this group of individuals, including one who is reading the Quran, is an ancient goddess, and framing it all is the biblical title, "And the prayer of faith shall save the sick." Of the many details of this painting, I also want to highlight the Arabic calligraphy on the top of the wall that seems to get cut off, which reads, "We have embraced the faith, so forgive us." This quote comes from the Quran, which we can see being cradled by an older gentleman in the foreground against his airy, light garments. Through the repeated use of religious texts in this piece, Lewis seems to hint at the universality underlying different branches of the Abrahamic religions. This was a bold stance to take at the time, especially since in this era, British-Egyptian relations were contentious. Beginning in 1852, Britain began stationing increased forces in Egypt to oversee numerous construction projects that benefited Britain and the rest of Europe enormously. For Lewis, the tranquility of Egypt was not to be disturbed. His enchantment with the city of Cairo ignited within him a passion, resulting in the creation of hundreds of sketches, which Lewis later used to create his paintings. In his communication to close friend William Makepeace Thackeray, Lewis expressed a deep adoration for the leisure of Egypt, a love that is echoed in Mary Shelley's 1818 novel, Frankenstein, where she writes of characters who turned their eyes toward the east. The Persian, Arabic, and Sanskrit languages engaged their attention. When you read their writings, life appears to consist in a warm sun and a garden of roses, in the smiles and frowns of a fair enemy, and the fire that consumes your own heart. Such a passage captures the lifelong attachment Lewis nurtured for Egypt. Such a love persisted that, in the year of his death, 1876, Lewis painted this piece on the right that encapsulated this notion of serenity, titled "On the Banks of the Nile." The impetus of this piece is speculated to be the final sale of Egyptian shares in the Suez Canal to the British Prime Minister. With the last of Egyptian shares in the canal relinquished to the British government, Lewis saw the sphere of tranquility surrounding Egypt and the Orient as a whole as having popped. Our final stop today will be in Istanbul, Turkey. We march through time to arrive in the year 1990, a century and a half after Lewis's prayer painting. This piece here is also an oil on canvas, but this time by John Bratby, and it is entitled "Self-Portrait in Missoni Cardigan with Patty in Red and Istanbul Mosque." So vibrantly depicted are the painter, John Bratby, and a female friend of his, Patty. Their joyous features are accentuated by the generous style of Bratby's loose hand. The vivid colors are oversaturated tenfold to convey the excitement in their cheeks and the magnificence of the mosque's domes. Notice how the same colors of the mosque adorn the fabrics of their clothes. Before examining the details of this painting, I want to first steer us towards Bratby's broader creations. In the time jump we made from the late 19th century to the late 20th century, Britain has undergone a radical transformation. Where there were colonies and imperial charters for trade, there now lies a fragmented commonwealth. By 1990, all of Britain's former colonies had declared their independence and broken officially from British governance. Still, there lay an inkling of imbalanced political power that we shall explore later. By the time Bratby had completed this painting, here on the left, he had already founded an art movement known as kitchen sink realism, which attempted to capture the discontentment of the British populace after a national decline in welfare and economic productivity. While Bratby's earlier works possess this muted color palette, this is evidently not true with his self-portrait, in which the milieu of the past has been shaken off. As Britain entered the 1990s, a sense of liberation disseminated across Europe. With the fall of the Berlin Wall, East and West were no longer so stringently separated. And thus, we arrive at the painting before us, where Bratby and Paddy are positioned so carefree in front of the Süleyman Mosque in Istanbul, Turkey. Now, at first glance, all this painting seems to embody is vulgarity. The woman's exposed breasts, the loose brush strokes that convey a sloppiness, and the ordering of the subjects in the title. Notice how the mosque is mentioned last in the sequence. This mosque was completed in 1557 by the Ottoman ruler Suleiman the Great. He dedicated this marvel to his son, the Crown Prince Mehmed. Upon closer inspection, we can see that the artist depicts the temple on uneven ground, with a crooked base. The minarets of the structure are not perfectly symmetrical. Yet, the sense of harmony is still conveyed with the blunt lines of the oil paint. Now, in zooming back out on the painting, a few conclusions can be drawn relating to our theme of Orientalism. With the completion of the Suez Canal and the advancement of transportation technology, the Orient has again become ripe for the taking. However, the sphere of tranquility has forever vanished, as painter John Frederick Lewis implies. Now, the Orient has become vulnerable once more to Western encroachment. However, this time, the impositions look different. In the first painting, we examined the subject of the Orient, the Nawab, whose royal pageantry was centered and the political discourse relegated to the background. However, as time has passed and as the world has changed, now the local inhabitants of the Orient are nowhere to be found. The background is empty, save for the crooked mosque of Istanbul. The Orient has vanished, it seems. Or has it become reinvented to fit with a new Western imagination? Today, we surveyed 3 paintings depicting subjects from across the British Orient in order to better understand how perceptions of Eastern subjects shifted throughout time. In Tilly Kettle's 1772 painting of Shuja-ud-Dawla, the Nawab of Oudh, we set the stage of the Orientalist academic movement and the portrayal of Near East subjects. This painting embodies opulent portraiture movement, with a few nods to the burgeoning economic trends of the time. Through John Frederick Lewis's "And the Prayer of Faith Shall Save the Sick," we gleaned the romantic lens through which many Britons viewed the East. The religious overtones of the painting illustrate how religious differences were embraced rather than shunned by British viewers. Finally, we studied John Bratby's self-portrait painting, in which the background of the Oriental landscape seems to have been cleared except for the material things which make up this Orientalist imagination. With no local people to observe their visit, Bratby and his good friend Paddy are free to impose themselves on the Orient without much retribution. Through the tumultuous history of British colonization, a fascination with the East has always been present, with its food, its religions, and most importantly, with its multitudes of people. In this modern age, the British Empire is no more. Although the field of Oriental studies has died out, and the multifaceted aspects of Near Eastern and Asian art are emerging, the realm of Orientalist art still holds an enticing veil of seduction for many viewers, myself included. But why do these depictions of princes, palaces, and people enchant us so? Perhaps it is because we cannot find them in the real world to any capacity. They are not depictions of real life, but of an imagined Orient, with a cast of foreboding or easygoing characters, with imposing landscapes and grandiose architecture. These inventions are of the mind, and what better way to ensnare the mind than with an illusory trap that takes a hold of the senses and leaves one blind of the material, tangible events transpiring before one's eyes. The following slides list the slide numbers and corresponding images. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to my tour.